We're glad to have you joining us, and for our audience here in person, we're going to be getting started in just a couple of minutes. So now is a great time. Use the restroom, go grab yourself a snack, a beverage, let the dog out, do whatever you need to do. We'll be getting going in, 2 minutes. 2-minute warning. Hey, folks online. We're just mixing and mingling in here. I am saying nothing of importance. You still have about a minute to do whatever you need to do, and then we'll be getting started. All right, for the audience that's here, for the audience that's out there, welcome. My name is Jay Tifone, and I'm from the Office of Student Involvement. I am thrilled to have all of you here joining us as we explore the Leads Conference topic of resilience. Ooh, there we go. Actionable strategies to bounce back. Haley Grenier from Student Accessibility Services is also joining me in virtually facilitating this session and will be supporting the chat. Haley, thank you very much for doing that. Before we have the pleasure of introducing you to your speaker for the session, we'd like to review a few housekeeping tips for this session. So for the folks who are joining virtually, your microphone and camera are not enabled. Your microphone will remain muted to reduce background noise. The chat will be available during the presentation, which you are welcome to engage with. However, we encourage you to hold on any questions you have for the presenter until the end when we do our Q&A. Our presenter will not be monitoring the chat as she presents. Teams does have the ability to provide live captioning. If this is of interest to you, click more in the navigation bar that has the 3 dots, then language and speech, and then turn on live captioning. We ask that you be kind, as we're all here to have fun, learn, and engage, be with community, all of that. We ask that you also refrain from sharing any offensive content or using inappropriate language. Thanks for your cooperation. There we go. Here we go. The session is being recorded, and there is no obligation to use the chat or be on camera here in the session for participation in the session. Okay. Now, with that, I'm going to jump back and just share with you SNHU's access and accommodation information up here on the slide. Please know that you have the ability to engage with any of our accessibility centers should you need any sort of accommodation. Okay. All right. With all of that, it's my pleasure to introduce our presenter today. As you can see right here, In her staff role at Southern New Hampshire University, Shauna Colbath works with new admission counselors and team leads to gain necessary skills to fulfill role objectives while developing confidence, comfortability, and competence. She's been in the learning and development space for the last 8 years, primarily focusing on the staff to student experience through quality assurance. She's also an adjunct faculty member at Southern New Hampshire University in the General Education First Year Experience Academic Unit. Through coaching and feedback, Shauna helps others recognize their strengths and potential to grow. Shauna received a bachelor's degree from the University of New Hampshire, a Master of Arts in Teaching degree from the University of New Hampshire, and a Master of Science in Higher Education Administration degree from Southern New Hampshire University. All right, we love that. Shauna lives in the Seacoast region with her 2 children. So with that, I'd like to now turn the microphone over to Shauna. Shauna, the floor is all yours.
Thank you for that great introduction. Welcome, everybody. So glad to have you here. So we're going to start with resilience. And when we think about resilience in the past, it was always something that was really thought to be you had it or you didn't. It was an innate thing. You couldn't develop it. And what really has been a focus in the last few years is understanding that you can grow your skills through intentional actions and strategies, which is particularly important in our post-pandemic world, where we want to build up that resilience so that we can more easily navigate what life throws at us. So my name, again, it's Shauna Colbath, and I'm here today to share with you some of the strategies that I use to build my resilience and also still use when challenges and setbacks occur. So back in 2018, I experienced the most profound career disappointment of my life. And I had graduated back in the 2008-2009 recession, so I was no stranger to career setbacks and disappointments. But this one really took the cake. It hit me personally as well as professionally. And it really made me understand that I needed to do something in my life to build my resilience and start to move forward. So it really was the catalyst for my resilience journey. So when I talk about resilience, what I mean is emotional resilience. So thinking through the ability to quickly bounce back from challenges and setbacks with a positive outlook. And I emphasize the words quickly because we want to be aware of the time frame it takes us to bounce back, and then also the positive outlook because we always need to be aware of where's our mindset, what are we telling ourselves as we're going through those setbacks and those challenges. So today we're going to look at the importance of resilience. We're going to do a little bit with journaling and reflection as an activity to help you build up to this journey. We're going to talk about your inner resilient voice, why that's so important to your resilience journey, influence and control in different situations, and how resilience and the connection to others are so important. Oh, all right. So we'll start with, there was a study done by Cigna back in 2020 where they looked at children and resilience and then also working adults and resilience. And with the children, what they saw is ages 5 to 11, pretty resilient. And I apologize for the screen. It's not quite doing what I wanted it to do. But what you would be able to see if it were clear is that 45% of 5 through 10-year-olds were classified as resilient. That actually goes down once we hit that 11-year-old mark in children, so 11 to 13. If you think back, middle school years, very formative years, when we start to look outward for where we are in the world as opposed to just our own personal opinions. And then it goes down even further to 22% once we hit that young adult year of 18 to 23. So when we're making those big decisions as far as what we're doing for next steps within our lives. So our resilience can already go down just while we're growing up. What was found through this study is that resilience tends to come back and grow stronger with more life experiences, particularly with having children and going through that as a parent. When we looked at when Cigna looked at the workforce, they saw that of the 5,000 survey respondents, about 37% of them classify themselves as highly resilient. That's not very many. And really what they saw as well is that number continued to go down for part-time employees and for those who consider themselves to be underemployed. So what are we going to do about that? We want to be in that 37%. We want to grow that 37%. I certainly wasn't in that 37% back in 2018, but I would classify myself as part of it now. So what is it that you can do if you're finding that you're not necessarily in that highly resilient classification? So I started with journaling and reflecting. And this was good for me because I needed a space to get my raw emotions out for what was happening to me back in 2018 and really be able to just get all my thoughts, all my feelings out onto paper before I really was able to figure out how I was going to move forward. One of the things for me is that I sit and I stew and I spiral when something happens that I need to bounce back from that's a challenging situation. So, why do I spiral? Why does anybody spiral? That's a great question. Not here to answer that. But what I do want to have us think about is what is that spiral? What causes us to do so? And how does it affect our resilience timing? So, first we start with our event. So, what is it that happened? There's a beginning, there's a middle, and then there's an aftermath. And the aftermath has a lot more to do with how we're processing that event and what actually occurred. From there, we're going to look at our feelings. So, most likely, if you're in a challenge or a setback, those are negative feelings. You're going through something. For instance, when I was going through, my career setback, not getting that job, I was in a conference room being told that I was not equipped to lead. And I was trying my hardest not to cry. I was trying to just get through the rest of that meeting, get back to my desk, get to a bathroom, clean myself up, not have anybody see me because I really didn't want those tears to fall. So I was angry. Next, we look at our self-talk. How we talk to ourselves matters in these situations, and we'll talk more about that when we get to building our inner resilient voice. But again, we're either having a negative self-talk or positive self-talk. It depends on really what you're able to, say to yourself in the moment in that situation. And then our feelings and our self-talk are either in cooperation, where they're both negative or they're both positive, or they're in invalidation, where one may be negative, one would be positive. And based on whether we're in cooperation, particularly if they're both negative, we're going to move into either reacting to the situation, but if we're able to have them in invalidation, so negative feelings, but then have positive self-talk, that's the invalidation, and we react we act as opposed to react. And that's what leads us to either stew in the moment or move forward with that more positive outlook. For me, in 2018, it was all about sitting and stewing in that moment and really spiraling, catastrophizing, saying things to myself like, of course, you didn't get this job. You weren't ready for it. This was never going to work out. Those were the types of things that I was saying to myself. So between being angry, saying those things, I was certainly in that cooperation. And my reaction was to sit where I was, find people who would make me feel good by feeling bad and talking about those different moments. So what was I going to do? Well, I was going to stew. Like I said, this is where I felt really comfortable. This is where I found people who would help me to maintain those negative emotions, that negative self-talk. And really, it was something that held me back for a very long time. I would wake up in the morning and I would feel crappy. I would go to work and I would feel bad. I would have a chip on my shoulder and I would go home at night and vent my frustrations. I was just a walking buzzkill. When I would walk into a room, I wouldn't just bring the room's vibe down, I would take the whole building down. And it really was just a dark cloud that followed me around. And this is when I absolutely knew there was something I had to do about it. And when I moved into thinking about that spiral, how could I flip that upside down and take action on what was going on. So with that, I got out my trusty journal, a physical journal that I kept in order to keep track of all the times that I felt challenges and setbacks that were occurring, and where I saw that my resilience was really being challenged. In my journaling, I went back to the event and really thought of the context, the who, the what, the where, what was said, what was the tone of the event, so that I could really understand what I was feeling in that moment. This could be a very cathartic exercise because it does bring you back into where you are feeling, so that you can just truly understand what it is. So you're probably not going to be very objective in this moment, and that's okay. Next, I started to identify, where are my triggers? What was it that was setting me off? Was it something that was said? Was it how that it was said? Was it who said it? Was it the atmosphere? Just trying to get a better understanding of what was it that made this setback especially challenging for me and made me need to pull on my resilience skills. Next, I would look at the time frame. How long was it taking me to move through these emotions to bounce back? And really, it's okay if it's going to take, if it takes you an hour, maybe it takes you 2 hours, maybe it takes you 2 weeks or 6 months. Right now, it's really just looking at what is that time frame so that you're getting a good baseline of what you're moving through and how you can improve. And finally, an opportunity to reflect on the setback or the situation as a whole. After you go through this exercise. And this is where you might be able to start being a little bit more reflective, objective in what's going on with how you're feeling. And then if you're able to move through this exercise, it's what's going to set you up for the ability to bounce back. So this is the template that I used. I would recommend, getting a separate journal to look at all of this, a Word document, OneNote, whatever you use, in order to make sure that you're able to return to it time and again, to actually do some reflection of your reflection. Because you're going to be able to see what patterns start to emerge. Are there any similarities in the different situations? Do they occur in the same places in your personal life, maybe in your professional life? What are your triggers? Is there a pattern there? Are there any similarities? And then also, how long does it take you to bounce back? Are you seeing that there's any reduction in time? For myself, for my career setback, it took me 3 reflection entries to identify what my trigger was. And it actually was a person that I interacted with that would set me back and set me stewing. If I hadn't been doing this reflection, then I wouldn't have been able to notice that pattern as quickly as I did in order to help me start to move forward and bounce back and put other things in place. What's great about this activity is that it helps you gain information about yourself, but it is not going to help you necessarily build your resilience and bounce back. This is the starting point. You need this information in order to put different strategies into place. So let's talk about our inner resilient voice. If you find yourself saying things like, bad things always happen to me, I'm not good enough, why bother, I'm going to mess up anyway, what we really are looking to do is change that into something more like, let's see where this goes. I am ready to try something new. And what's the worst that can happen? When we have that inner resilient voice, we're really challenging ourselves to reframe what we're saying, what our self-talk is, to look at these challenges and setbacks instead of being insurmountable as learning experiences. What can I learn from this? How can I grow? And how can I be better moving forward so that if something similar happens, I am again able to pull on my strengths and not have it be such a challenging moment in the future. With that, with our reframing of our thoughts, we want to have a positive self view. We want to celebrate the successes that we've had along the way. We want to set up realistic goals for ourselves, nothing that's too large that will lead us to feeling disappointed if we're not able to accomplish that quickly. We need to find our people, and we'll talk about the connection with others in just a little bit, and then building that hopeful outlook. What we're going to focus on with our inner resilient voice right now is really that positive self-view and that hopeful outlook that you want to have. And we're actually going to do that by finding out who is our inner critic, that voice in the back of our head that probably isn't super kind to us. Really what we say to ourselves matters. And we need to listen when we're in those moments when our inner critic is saying something that maybe isn't as that great. And what I want you to do is challenge that inner critic. And the way that we challenge that inner critic so we can move into more of a inner resilient voice, first we need to name it. By naming that inner critic, it personifies who that is, and it actually creates distance between you and that voice. So my inner critic's name is Ted. Ted is a real person from my past. Ted is a bully. So I want you to take just a moment. What could you name your inner critic that separates it, creates that distance, and personifies it? And it could be anything. It could be a name. It could be just an adjective, Debbie Downer, overwhelmed Olivia, Chuck, whatever you think would help you to separate that voice from your mind. And for those of you on the chat, throw it in the chat. What is your inner critic? What are you naming it? Once we've named our inner critic, we can now identify it. We can notice when and how it shows up. And with that, listen to it. What is that voice trying to tell you? There is information here. It's not necessarily information that we want to act on, but really, why is it showing up? For me, Ted loves to show up when I want to try something new, when I want to grow, when I want to develop. Ted is there telling me that I am not ready. I can't do this. I really should be 100% ready to make that step forward. And as a quick aside, you're never going to be 100% ready for that next step. I like to gauge it at 70%. That's when I know that it's right for me to move forward and for me to stop listening to Ted. And finally, you're going to take action. Use that information that your inner critic is giving you to either follow it, which will keep you probably where you are, or you can ignore it, which is that first big step in moving forward. For me, I know Ted will never leave me, and quite frankly, I don't want him to. Ted is there when I know that I'm doing the right thing, when I know that I need to grow in order to not remain stagnant where I'm at. So once you know who your inner critic is, as I said, you want to make sure that you're not following that advice, but you're using that information. And what we need to do often is just reframe what that sentiment is that our inner critic is saying to us and being able to change it into more of that positive and encouraging self-talk. So thinking of talking yourself with positive reinforcement, such as I've done a good job before and I'll do a great job with this. Motivation thinking, this has been difficult, but I have the knowledge and experience to do it. Or ways to boost your self-esteem. This is actually one of my favorite daily affirmations. I am too determined to be defeated. While I may go through challenges and I may fail and I may fall down, I am going to get back up. That is the big thing. That's the big part of building our inner resilient voice, is that how we talk to ourselves matter. And in those moments when we feel down, it's ourselves that can pick ourselves up and move forward. So let's look at our spiral again for one moment. Particularly our feelings, our self-talk, and our corroboration or invalidation. When I go through my challenges and have to pull on my resilience now, I look at, I'm still going to have those negative feelings, and that's okay. They're going to happen. That's natural. But then really looking at, how am I talking to myself? And if I'm using that encouraging self-talk, having that positive outlook on the situation in life, then I'm going to be in that invalidation area where they don't correspond to each other. And that, again, is what's going to help me to bounce back much quicker. So I want to get tactical with our next strategy and really thinking about our circles of influence, what we can influence, what we can control, and what we need to let go. I want to make sure that we have a shared definition of that. So, influence, really thinking of our ability to affect something, control, our ability to direct behavior or the course of an event, and letting go, our ability to relinquish our grip on something. So, with the circles of influence, this is actually an exercise where you can plot out what is going on within your situation so that you can see these different areas of control, influence, and concern, but also regain some of your agency in what you're going through if you're feeling like a lot of it is out of your control. So, when we think about control, it really is it in my control? And those things are, your thoughts, your actions, and how you respond to that situation, your influence, where can I make an impact? Thinking about an impact with relationships, either work relationships or family relationships, the people that you're around, how can you influence them within that situation? And then lastly, our concern are those areas that we just have to accept. What can we not make any movement on? That can be things like politics, the economy, the weather, natural disasters. What do we just have to accept knowing that it's there? I want you to take a moment and think about an event that you have recently gone through or are currently going through, and how would you be able to map out what is in your control, what is within your influence, and what are those things that are areas of concern that you just have to accept. And I would encourage you to go back to this strategy, to this activity when you have more time to really be able to see what's going on here. Because what we need to do is then be able to understand what we cannot control, what we have to let go of. Letting go can be very difficult, especially for my type A perfectionist friends out there. That's where we can struggle a little bit. So we have to understand how it is that we let go by being realistic about the situation and accepting what it is, the situation for what it is. For me, not getting that job, I needed to accept that I was going to get a new manager, and I was going to still have to show up every day and do my work to the best of my ability and gain trust with a new person. Next, we have to be at peace with ourselves with what we're going through. For myself in that situation, I had to know that I gave it my all during the interview process. I did a good job, even though I didn't get the position. I showed up well, and I could be proud of myself for that. Making space for a new start. This was my catalyst. This was the start of my resilience journey. This is where I decided to stop and intentionally make effort to grow and to move forward and to better myself. And finally, we have to be okay with not having control of everything. Again, very hard when we want to have control, when we want to understand where our agency is. But if we're going through those circles of influence and we've mapped out where we have control, where we have influence, we can focus there and do what we can for ourselves and with others within who we interact with to then help us accept those things that we need to let go of. So finally, I want to talk about connection with others. So this is something that is very important for us to move through challenging situations. For myself, I thought that I could journal my way out of my feelings, that I could journal my way back into feeling good and to bounce back, that I didn't need to open up, that I didn't need to be vulnerable with anybody else. And it actually set me back on my resilience bounce back a lot, because what I did instead was find people who would let me vent to them. So I had great people that I could go to, but they continued to let me be negative, to stew, to catastrophize even more, to not move forward. And they were not the right people that I needed in that moment. So we have to make sure that we're surrounding ourselves with the right people who are going to provide us the right support, and tools to move forward. So we are social creatures. We crave connection with others, particularly when we're going through something. And when we find those people, what they can really do is help to provide us that empathetic support that we're looking for. They can put themselves in our situation. They can, be that ear for us to lean on. And with that, create a safe space to release those negative feelings. So you may still feel like you're venting a little bit, and that's okay. But it's the vent and what are you doing? Where's the problem solving that's going to come from expressing your negative feelings? Because we don't want them to be pent up or to pretend that they don't exist. Next, our people can help us find our confidence again and remind us of our purpose in our meeting. What is it that we are here to do? And why isn't it so important that we pick ourselves back up and move forward for ourselves and for the next situation that we may encounter? Others can help us maintain perspective of the situation as well. As I said, I love to vent and catastrophize, but someone can bring me back and say, Shauna, is it really that? I like to, make a mountain out of a molehill, die on that sword, all those fun little sayings. I need somebody else to help me and really put it back into perspective. And finally, others can help us laugh at the situation and ourselves. While what we go through, these challenges and setbacks, are not funny, there should be some humor within what we're going through, how we reacted, how we're trying to move forward. So being able to find the humor in those situations and just, bring levity to the situation. When you're finding your people, it's more than just having a network, which you may already have in your work life and your personal life, or just having people. You want to make sure that there are those who can provide you with day-to-day emotional support, with that we're going to give you that substantive interactions to really help you move forward. Again, not just a group of people who are allowing you to vent, but a group of people who are allowing you to vent, problem solve, and move forward with what you need. So what I want you to do is think through who are those people that you have in your life that you can commit to reaching out to when in the next couple of days when you have that situation that you're going through or that you've just recently been through, and think about your professional life, your personal life, your volunteer life, any of those different activities. Who are those people that you can pull on? I can tell you that I know that this is such a paramount part of the resilience journey because I now have a group of people that I can go to that I didn't have before that help to give me these different things. So I make sure that I'm looking for those people who are going to give me that empathetic support, that are going to help me laugh and help me maintain perspective so that I can move forward more easily. And finally, in my resilient journey, this took me a lot out of me to be able to put these different strategies into action, but I can tell you I know they work. I have used them to go forward through a divorce and its aftermath, losing a job, and then even the death of a colleague and many other situations. And I was lucky enough that as I went through this journey, as I grew, as I understood that there was more I needed to do to intentionally work on myself, more opportunities opened the doors for me. And I was actually offered the position that I was not offered back in 2018. So it all came full circle. I just needed to work harder and let that opportunity come to me. These strategies, they work for me. They may not necessarily work for all of you, but what I want you to do is try and find ways that you can reflect, be open-minded, and find your people so that you can help yourself move forward in those situations. And finally, I'll leave you with a quote from Maya Angelou, that you may not control the events that happen to you, but you can decide how you decide not to be reduced by them. Thank you.
Great. Okay, now we're going to open the floor to some questions. So if we have any questions from our audience here in the room, please do raise your hand. And we also have some questions online. So we'll first start with an online question. Many successful humans heard the same negative things throughout their career. For example, you are not right for this position, or you do not have what it takes. How does one get through not believing that negativity from self-belief of this is my path?
That is such a great question. And I think sometimes a challenging and a personal one to answer. I think when you hear that feedback, you just take it for what it is. I like to think of feedback that's very personal and to the core of who I am. If I agree with it or I don't agree with it, to think about it that way. And if I don't agree with it, I want to put it down the sink. I let it go down the drain. So if you feel like that is very personal to your core and not really who you are, that is not feedback that you should dwell on or that you should consider to be the end all be all of you. What it is information for you to step back and say, what else is it that I can do intentionally to grow or to showcase myself in a different way to certain people, and sometimes it's the people. Those may not be the right people to be receiving feedback from. I love that saying of you wouldn't listen to somebody's negative feedback if you wouldn't take advice from them.
Thank you. Another audience participant said, I have never been good at journaling and sometimes just don't know how to start or continue to keep doing that. If you don't have questions, how do you get started with it?
That is a great question, because I know journaling comes kind of natural to me. That's my wheelhouse. But I know a lot of people where they don't like to journal. It doesn't have that flow, that stream of consciousness. And what I would encourage you is to still take something like that template that I showed and bullet point it. What are just the words that come to mind when you're thinking of the event? What are the words that come to mind for those triggers and then, kind of like how you're talking to yourself, and just make a list, because you're still getting out the right information and it doesn't necessarily have to be in sentence form. It's more so about how are you capturing that information so you can do something with it later. So that would be my suggestion.
Another question in our audience.
A quick question I had was, a lot of the journaling stuff that you had to do with reflection and looking at yourself and breaking yourself down. What happens when you sort of like get into the habit of overanalyzing or entering into a phase of like analysis paralysis, where you're like really diving into yourself, where you just like stagnate?
I think that's a great question, because I totally understand that. My journaling tends to be when I'm not feeling good. That's when I get very creative. So I'm kind of in a lower place right there. So when I write things, it feels kind of negative, kind of low, and kind of beating myself up. So what I actually do is I find it okay to do that with my journaling, to get it out. That's where I get out all of my feelings. And then I step away and go do something that makes me feel good. I'm a huge music person, so I'll put on music that will make me feel better. I'll watch something on TV, I'll read a book, so I can kind of get out of that and separate myself from those feelings, so that later when I go back to do some of that analysis, I don't feel as paralyzed by seeing that it's kind of those negative connotations. So I cleared my head in a way. Does that help?
In the moment, what are some ways that you can deal with your emotions to not have them show?
I would love for somebody to tell me. I have a face that will tell you everything that I'm thinking when I'm going through. So it's very difficult to say this is what to do in that moment, but being aware that so much of this is just building self-awareness and knowing that you're going through something. One of the things that I do with my group of people in meetings where I know something tough is going to be coming up, or with my family, I have certain people that will message me or poke me and say, check your face, because that's where it is. And then I can realize what I'm going through and that it's showing. But I don't think there's a way to really stop or pause what you're feeling in that moment. And if anyone has any ideas, I would love to know myself.
You just mentioned your people. So for those who have moved to a new area without friends or family, how do they find their people? Do you have ideas around that?
Oh, I think that's great. I think the big thing is depending on what's in your area, if there are, there's a rec department that has activities for adults, a library, book club, work events, social events. I know there are groups on different social platforms that you can meet in person, that it's almost like speed dating, but for friendship. I would say that what I really started to do before I found the people that I was going to be comfortable opening up with, I found experts in the field that I wanted to emulate and learn more about. So for a long time, I wanted to know more about, kind of like shame and how that went. So I turned to Brene Brown and got really into her, listening to her. So she became one of my people. She couldn't talk back to me when I had questions or when I needed help. But that's where I started with finding, experts in the field as well, that really spoke to me and I could resonate with what they were saying. And then, open myself up to others as I got more comfortable in the area, which I hope you will as well.
We're seeing some support for Brene Brown in our chat. Another individual asked, I have others in my life who like to vent about the same things. How do I get them started on the path of building resilience? Do you have any recommended reading material?
Reading material, I can't think of off the top of my head. That's one that I can get back to you possibly. But what really worked for me, because I not only had vented to people, people like to vent to me. I'm just one of those people that people come to. And it was really frustrating because I would get into their spiral and I would stew with them. And what I found really helped is when I would give them that space, but then come back with, great, what are we going to do about it? And if you're always coming back with trying to help them problem solve, they tend to start getting the picture that this is not okay to just vent and stew and sit here. We need to start moving forward and doing something about it. So that was really helpful for me in my life. That was great advice that I got from a former leader, but not really sure about, different reading recommendations quite yet.
Thank you. I agree with this individual. Do you have any suggestions for how to reflect on or recount situations without reliving the emotions? I struggle with even telling someone about a struggle without reliving the strong emotions I had during the interaction, which just feels like worsening it.
Absolutely. And I think that that's something that takes time. I can tell you, in building this presentation and going back to my example of not getting the job, it was one of the first times that I could be very objective and I didn't get like hot under the collar, reliving those moments. And it does take time. It takes building kind of a tough skin. So I would encourage you to go through the reflective entries and those exercises, because what it does for me is it lets me get all of it out of my system, and then it sits in the paper and I can close the book on it. And so even if when I go back to look at it, I can look at it more objectively. And sometimes I can look at it and be like, wow, was that really that? Would I really have that strong of a reaction? But I think it depends on what the challenge is, what the setback is. So you know yourself the best for how that works for you. And if the journaling is something that is just too heavy for you, you may want to find a different strategy in order to understand what's going on as you move through those difficult challenges.
Do you have ideas on what to do if your constant negative feedback is coming from an immediate family member?
Oh, the dream killers. That's what I like to call them. That's what I call them in my life, those dream killers. Again, I think going back to that previous question, if you wouldn't take advice from them, don't take feedback from them. And then have an honest conversation. If it's a family member, there's love, there's trust there. Tell them how it makes you feel and that it is hurtful. That's really the only advice that I can give you. Have a conversation and try to move forward through that.
Thank you. If you feel like you have done everything in your power to make positive change, but you keep getting hit with the news that isn't in your control, so much so to where it piles up and you feel hopeless, what can you do?
That's a tricky one. I don't want you to feel hopeless. I would say that probably is not quite my wheelhouse to answer. You may want to look for, some others who have more experience with those feelings of hopelessness, who can help navigate you through those different situations. But I think that's a little bit above my pay grade.
Thank you. And there are resources in the chat for Help You, and we can provide those to any member of our audience as well. The next question. Currently dealing with a situation at work where I'm very frustrated, and I know when I talk about this with my boss, I will most likely show crying, anger, frustration. Any ideas how to calm yourself? I would imagine before going into those conversations.
Absolutely. And I would say, to you as well, before going into that situation, knowing that that's your body expressing your feelings in one way or another. That's the release that you need. And think about the relationship that you have with your boss. Is that a person where you can be raw and authentic and express those emotions? And if you can, have a conversation about that. Let them know I have a lot of feelings about what's going on, and this is how my body is going to respond. If that's something that you don't have that type of relationship with your boss, I mean, I would encourage you to start cultivating one and being vulnerable, building that safety, that psychological safety with them. But as far as calming yourself down, things that I've tried in the past, the power pose, right? Where you're the Superman power pose, getting, some of that energy, stand up, move around, move your body, stay hydrated, find a song that either lifts you up or gets the negative feelings out. I know for me, when I need a song that absolutely I'm in like that bad place and I need to just let it out. What is it called? Break Something by Limp Bizkit is a great one to get those feelings out, get the rage out before going into that meeting.
Thank you. And one last question. How would you recommend folks journal? Would you do it on a computer, in a notebook? What is your personal go-to?
So my personal go-to is the journal because I cannot type as fast as I think. My hand moves faster. So really, I think it's whatever works best for you, as long as you're keeping those entries so that you have the information to look back on and do that review.
Thank you.
Well, with that, we are going to wrap just a little early, but we know that we've got another session starting. So if folks do want to hop over to the next lead session that's going on, but before that, a very quick thank you to Haley in the chat and Elizabeth managing the Q&A, and especially to our presenter, Shauna. Thank you so very much. Online, in person, we are so grateful for the amazing advice today. Please, please, please tune in. There are still several more lead sessions occurring throughout today. We hope you'll check out the virtual programs in the chat, get your copy also, and to watch the leads playlist, as that will be, all recordings will be captured there very, very soon. So with that, we are going to wrap up this session. For those of you here in the audience, grab some snacks. For those of you at home, go raid the pantry, and we'll see you at the next session. Take care.